If you get a systemic fault, nobody's money is safe. Now, nobody's being told that. And they should be told that, because people need to understand their money is at risk, as we're now seeing. Because and we're still assuming that the FDIC and the FSCS is going to pay up. It can't. So that we're not just told the truth. People should be told, yes, no, this is not a funded scheme. Your money is not guaranteed.
Hi, I'm Tom Batchelor, and I'm talking to Phillip Ullmann about his 5 masters and how the role of the state could shape Britain in a better way. Phillip, thanks very much for chatting to us again today. I wanted to start by asking you about Silicon Valley Bank. It's been an extraordinary moment, one that you've predicted. What's your sense of the reaction around the world and whether that reaction has been sufficient?
Yes, so I think it's a start of what is going to be a collapse, as you say, Tom, I've been talking about for many months. I don't think we're getting completely straight answers as to how severe the problems are. We got such a huge amount of debt. You know, there are $700 trillion of derivatives, if not more. And the whole system, as we've talked about in the past, is fundamentally unstable. So because of fractional reserve banking, which very simply means that when I put £100 in the bank will actually lend £600 or £700, which means that my money isn't there in the bank. Now that means that fundamentally money has been created and the system is unstable and always will be, which means that one change of sentiment in any of the clearing banks can result in a complete collapse. So to me, what's likely to happen with people seeing businesses losing billions of pounds of cash is any bank is now prone to money being withdrawn by people, and then they become insolvent. They're effectively
a run
of bank. It's always so. How can you build the system out through which society builds an economy around a fundamentally unstable system? The answer is you can't and should never have. We've had it for 400 years, but the answer is now we're seeing that this is at the end of its life cycle. Sure. And if we need to start to look at a stable system, which is dramatically better than what we have.
I mean, I agree it is a bit of a house of cards, but what was your sense of the panic around contagion and also the response? Because, you know, one of your views is that it's not really the state's responsibility to constantly step in and constantly shore up the system, and yet that is what's happened on this occasion. Is that not going to be the likely knee-jerk reaction going forward?
Yeah, I think you're correct in what you're saying. We have to start to decide what is the role of the state and what is the role of businesses. And we're not clear. Nobody's actually clear. And the way I think about it simply is that the state should be referee, but not actually playing in the game. You can't both ref and actually be a team, but that's what you try and do. So you try to create a vision, a set of values, but then you actually operate and actually are both the referee and play in the game. That's a conflict of interest, and that's fundamentally where we are. The state needs to let go. It needs to start to recognise that it needs to make the space for people to create, to come up with their own ideas, and not actually the state actually doing it themselves. So fundamentally, what's becoming clear now is there's no division of responsibilities between a state and the market, and that's going to be clearly defined. And I think once you start to recognise the state has to let go, has to create an environment where people can make decisions. I think what we're recognising is that in order to live a kind of full life, you have to make decisions. And the kids, you see with the kids, if you speak to the kids want to decide things. But if as a
independently of everyone else.
I know with my own kids, you have to give them the space to decide for themselves. But what happens in businesses, what happens in the state is the decisions are made at the top. So in a big business, the chief executive will sit there and lots of decisions will come to the top, and there'll be a presentation, and the CEO will make a decision about something which is way down the line. But that means that people who are close to the coalface are not actually really living a life because they can't make decisions. The same is true of the state. The state is equally controlling, and they're trying to make decisions now which shouldn't be made by the state. So,
But this big state and big government have been in bed together for years, and that's almost the problem, isn't it? There's too much alignment there. There's too much self-interest, and that needs to break down.
I think Aristotle he said that there's never really been a proper democracy because you end up with oligarchy, with all the different families actually working together and effectively becoming a dictatorship. And that's what we have with the state incestuously related to the market, whether here or in America. And therefore you actually take power away from individuals, and people are not free to actually live a meaningful life.
I mean, I think we're still living the legacy out of 2008, through that last decade where, the state got bigger. And even, during the pandemic, again, the state had to take on a lot of responsibility. The state got bigger. The state had to push out loans, et cetera, et cetera. And as a result, that size is a problem, isn't it? I mean, a smaller state is your model.
Absolutely right. Yes, the state can't run everything. It's just too remote. It's got to be clear. What it should be doing is creating a vision, and then ensuring that there's enough monitoring capability, enough measures in place for the system to self-manage. And that's a completely different vision, which communists don't understand, nor do capitalists. And therefore, that is critical in the vision that we're talking about, the responsible society, the covenantal society, whichever you want to call it. It's about letting go. The centre has to let go, and that means that people actually live meaningful lives.
Sure. But there's always responsibilities the state has. I mean, with law and order, in healthcare, in education, and the funding of all those things. So there has to be some sort of relationship between state, business, and communities that does work.
Well, the question is the state responsible for those things, or is it responsible for setting the values, setting the vision, ensuring that the measures are in place and the truth is being told, and then leaving it to society, to civic trust that we discuss, to actually do it. And that will actually distribute responsibility. That you can't make all the decisions in the centre because fundamentally you're disempowering people, and you end up with people leading lives that are not meaningful. So no, there's no question. You asked me in the case of COVID, did we get it wrong? Yes, we were much too centralised. I've got friends who were doctors. I'm not an expert in what happened, but I know I've friends who are doctors who said that the number of people, unfortunately, that were killed because the consultants were all told to drop everything and move all to COVID. Meant that they lost a lot of patients, were simply ignored, and therefore their conditions got worse and worse. And when they came back to the normal practice after the end of COVID, people didn't survive. So again, that's because it's too centralised. You're what I think is the best way of putting it is almost taming the ego. I've talked about this before with you, but I think it's a useful model. You start with when you're born, you're egocentric. And the idea is to tame that ego and then to become ethnocentric, to focus on the group, the family, and focus on the community. And then, so that's taming of my own ego, not crushing it, but taming it. And then you go to sociocentric, which is then recognizing it's my group, but there are other groups as well. And you have to tame the group ego. In the world we live in, we don't do a very good job of taming the individual's ego, and then we don't tame the group ego. So what you're trying to do is effectively create more humility and therefore taming that ego, which means that you make space for others.